Okay. So yeah, I like doing history. I love history of all different topics. I've done a book on Colorado. I'm working on one right now for Galena, and that's coming along very well. It'll be out next year. So I'll continue to do books until I die. That's just my passion, and that will be for another 150 years at least, hopefully. So anyway, we're going to talk today on the Anvil Club, which is right across the street here. And I got to tell you, the Anvil Club, it really has a very colorful history. And I dug into this here and I found out so many interesting facts which I'm going to share with all of you today. So we know that initially the property was the possession of a man named Alfred Edwards. And Alfred Edwards was born in New York in 1802. So we're going way back. And he journeyed west at the age of 27, and he settled here in Dundee in 1839. That's a long time ago. He became a major landowner in and around Dundee in the early 1800s. Now here's a map that was dated 1872. Now this is interesting here because it shows the various landowners and the property that was owned by various individuals. Here's the property that Mr. Edwards owned in 1872. So first of all, here's the river, okay? And see this like right here? This is the water races that used to be in old Carpentersville. Here's Carpentersville right here, old Carpentersville. This is going here. Here's Dundee, and to tell you the truth, like Main Street is probably right in this area here. So it gives you an idea. So here's Dundee at the time. Here's this piece of property right here all by itself, almost the same size as Dundee that Edwards owned. Everything in orange is property that Mr. Edwards owned in the 1870s. And he already had sold off a lot of the property by that time. So it just helps you to appreciate that he owned a major portion of the area at that time. Now, Alfred Edwards and his wife, Julia, they sold the Anvil Club property on September 29, 1855 to Jeremiah Austin. He was a 28-year-old farmer. I tried to find out where his property was at, and I couldn't find his property, so I'm not sure where it was at. But anyway, regarding this property here, the Anvil Club, it continued to change hands a number of times up until 1872. And 1872 was a major important year for this piece of property. Here's the reason why. In 1872, a man named Hendricks and Sherman, they purchased the property, and they're the ones who built the initial frame wood structure that we see today, which is the Anvil Club. So that's when that building, the initial part of it was built, 1872. Now, it's noteworthy that Hendricks is listed in the 1878 Kane County Directory as a blacksmith. And here's the actual directory. It's called the Past and Present of Kane County, 1878. And look there, I have it highlighted. There you see it, where it mentions Hendricks as a blacksmith and then Hendricks and Mueller as wagon makers. And I found it so interesting. Look at that, how they were listed. P.O. Box, Dundee. That's it. That's all you needed back then. So, things were different at that time. So in 1875, Sherman sold his half of his investment to Hendricks for $675. That's what it cost. That's all he made for it. Now, don't forget, though, we're talking back over 100 years ago. $675 was a lot of money back then. That was more than a year's wage at that time. So that was a good chunk of change. On the same day, though, Hendricks, who just purchased it from Sherman, he sold the entire parcel of property to Frederick Mueller. So they did some shifting of hands on this date for this property. So although Mueller was now the sole owner of the property, Hendricks and Mueller formed a new partnership. And the enterprise was called Hendricks and Mueller Wagon Makers. So that's what was taking place here at this location. Now, the Hendricks and Mueller blacksmith shop was the place to go for new shoes for your horse. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Let's go back here. I'm going to hit this button here. So you're seeing them shoeing a horse here, or to buy a wagon. So that's what they were doing. They were wagon makers as well as blacksmiths. Now, Hendricks and Mueller were in the blacksmith business up until 1893 here at this location. On January 7th, 1893, David J. Haverkamp acquired the blacksmith shop. And I have to tell you something. That's a special name for somebody here in this room. You know why? This girl right here behind the counter here, I'm putting her on the spot here, Kim, she's actually a Haverkamp. So this would have been your what? Was it your like great-great-grandfather or? Yeah. So the Haverkamps are still around. I'll tell you a little story too. Tom Roser, who owns Otto, he, a friend of his, an associate of his, was out on the East Coast, I think it was last week. And whoever he was speaking with, he mentioned to them where he's from, here in this Dundee area. So one of the gentlemen there pops his hand up and says, oh, you know what? He says, I belong to a club over there. He says, you do? Which one? He says, the Anvil Club. So he says, you do? He says, yeah, I've been a member for 20 years, but I've never been there. You know? So he asked the question, well, why? Why are you a member if you haven't even gone there? He says, because my family used to own that property. He says, he's a Haverkamp. Isn't that something? So, interesting little story, isn't it? So, yep. So, Haverkamps, that was an important name here for this shop here. And here's a picture, actually a photograph of the Anvil Club, which at that time was the blacksmith shop. And look at the top there. No question about that name. It's Haverkamp, you know. So, and I'll tell you what, it's interesting. You like to know who is who in a picture, you know. So there's different individuals here and here. I know for a fact which one of these persons is Haverkamp. And I'll tell you why. I did some digging. Thank goodness for the search engines on the computers today. But things you can find are unbelievable. I found a photograph of David Haverkamp and his family. Here it is. There he is. So there's David John Haverkamp and his family in 1904. So look at that. Look at him there. There's no question. That's him right there. No question whatsoever. And I really believe that close up that these are his children and possibly his wife sitting in that wagon. But I'm not positive, but I think that it is them. So that's a pretty cool photograph, isn't it? So there we are in Dundee. Here's the interior. There's a blacksmith shop, you see. There's the forge. There's the big door in the front that we see to this day. So that was the true blacksmith shop. And that was a common trait back then I found regarding forges of this type. There's different kinds of blacksmith shops. And this is a forge blacksmith shop because of the forge here. And, for example, there is an operating blacksmith shop that's still operating today as it has been for the last 100 years in Galena. And they have the exact same thing, all the horseshoes on the ceiling, just like that on the rafters. And I was just actually talking with Tom Roser 2 days ago in his office. We were talking. He mentioned to me when he was remodeling this in the last year that they had all these nails up on these rafters. And they didn't know what the nails were for until he saw this photograph. So that's interesting. So that's what those are for. Yep. Another photograph. Very cool. Showing the blacksmith shop at that time. Now, this is a cool picture. Diamond Jim's on the corner. There you have it right there. That's how it used to look. You see? Yeah, it sure does. And I did research on this name here, A.J. Horman. I tried to dig into this to find out what I could find out about Horman, because his name is on the building there. I found this much out. His name, the A stands for August. August J. Horman, I know that. I know that he was born May 10th, 1842 in Germany. I found that information out, but that's all that I could find about this gentleman. I'm sure if I would have had more time, I could perhaps have dug deeper, found out more information about him and about the shop here, but at that time, that's all I know. That goes back well over 100 years. So you look here, this building is still there. That's the house on the next block. This is the backyard, evidently. So when you look at these photographs, don't you just feel like it's such a peaceful time? It just makes you feel like things were so much slower and calmer, quiet. There wasn't jets going overhead, you know. You heard the trot of a horse perhaps on the street, and that was it. So another change took place in 1911. And this is a newspaper called the True Republican. And this date in this paper is February the 8th, 1911. And this is what it states. Mr. and Mrs. Horman Becker were most enjoyably surprised at their home on East Elm Street on Sunday evening by about 20 of their lady and gentleman friends. The guests called unannounced and presented Mr. and Mrs. Becker with a half-dozen silver knives and forks as a token of their esteem and as a slight remembrance for their many friends upon their departure from this city. About February 14th, they expect to go to Dundee, Illinois, where Mr. Becker has purchased property and where he will start a blacksmith shop. So there it is, 1911. So that's when Mr. Becker, moved to Dundee to here and took over the blacksmith shop here, which is today the Anvil Club. So evidently he lived out in the Belvedere Sycamore area, DeKalb area. Now, according to the 1940 census, Mr. Becker was born in 1879. His wife's name was Martha, and they had two sons, Raymond and Herbert. Herman Becker kept the blacksmith shop in operation for 44 years, up until 1955. In 1954, 10 prominent Dundee area men began to dream of forming a private dinner club where they could relax and where food and service would be the very best. Private dinner clubs are popular to this day throughout the world. In Chicago, you have the Standard Club, the Cliff Dwellers, Mid-America Club, and the Metropolitan Club, just to mention a few that are still out in operation today and quite popular. When these clubs started, the methods of communicating with people and exchanging ideas were limited. Clubs were important because you connected with people you wouldn't otherwise see. So people loved, in businessmen and so on, these clubs were important, and they still are for this purpose. In 1954, these men began forming a dream of a private dinner club. Let me see something here. Okay, I make sure I didn't copy the same slide there. Okay, so here they are. They want to make this club up where the food is and relaxation, the service is the very best. Here's the 10 men: Ed Eichler, Joseph Estes, Bill Ball, George Edwards, Al Edwards. Now this is Al Edwards, which I'll talk about later on, not the same one who owned the property years ago. This is a relative of his. And also, this is his brother George. Here's Abner, Fred Simpson, Bill O'Brien, Ray Curnow, and Al Kirkland. These are the 10 men who founded the Anvil Club. Now, I'm just going to mention a few examples of who these men are so we get an idea of what they were doing in their life. Ed Eichler, he was the son-in-law of Max McGraw, the founder of McGraw-Edison Electric Company and also McGraw Wildlife Foundation Preserve. In the 1930s, Ed Eichler and Max McGraw also started the Milk Pail Restaurant. So that shows you one example of one of the men who started the Anvil Club. Another man, Joseph Estes. He was the son-in-law of Edmund Hager, the son of David Hager. David Hager is the one who founded Hager Pottery, which I'll talk about later on. Joe Estes became general manager of Hager Pottery in 1938, and in 1954, he became the president. So he was one of the members. And then there's Bill Ball as an example. He was the officer of the Bank of Arlington Heights, treasurer of the Quaker Oats Company. He was also a lieutenant commander in the armed forces in 1945. I mentioned that for a reason, which I'll go to in a few minutes. But anyway, these three men are examples of the entire 10 that were the founders of the Anvil Club, all 10 being prominent and successful individuals. Now, the ideas started flowing when they learned that the old blacksmith shop on Meyer Street in East Dundee might be for sale. So at the time, Mr. Becker, though 75 years old, was still operating the shop, but his forge was then turning out beautiful handcrafted porch railings instead of horseshoes. So things were changing. Now, though weather-beaten, the building was found to be very sound and as a rock, and the property was purchased. So attention was placed on retaining as much as possible of the century-old blacksmith decor while adding authentic furnishings from the gay 90s. Marble pillars and sections of an old wood bar were located, along with the carved wood cherubs resurrected from a Chicago theater, which I'll show you later on. The tools on the walls and the forge itself, including the enormous bellows that had been operated by foot power, were the original implements used in the blacksmith shop, and they were retained in the blacksmith shop, or the Anvil Club, during these years. Where'd that go? Oh, there it is. Okay. So, on February the 10th, 1956, with a bar, a forge, and seating and capacity for 75, the Anvil Club celebrated its grand opening. The day of the grand opening, the food was cooked on the original forge. Here's an example of what the forge looked like. That wasn't the forge at the Anvil Club, but that's what a forge looks like in a blacksmith shop. That's what they cooked on. The opening of the Anvil Club and individual attending made headlines. Here's an example from the Daily Herald in 1956. It mentions Mr. William H. Ball. And he invited a group of the Dunhams and the Dowlings with him to what they called back then a Scarsdale party on the opening evening of the Anvil Club near Dundee. This is another article from 1960. This is from the Arlington Heights Herald. And here they're actually showing a number of individuals at the forge. And that right there is Bill Ball right there. But the reason why I like this article is because of what it mentions here in the bottom. Recent attention to the club was built with lumber. I'm sorry, I'm going to start that again. A recent addition to the club was built from lumber of an old barn selected for its matching traits. So they were adding on. The Anvil Club was getting larger. And they spent much detail trying to keep the decor and the facility looking as it had for many, many years. Now it's interesting that a number of the early owners of the Anvil Club were descendants of early Dundee settlers. George and Alfred Edwards were great-grandsons of Alfred Edwards, the original person that owned the property. Joseph Estes was the son-in-law of Edmund Hager, the son of David Hager, who purchased the Dundee Brick Company in 1871. That would develop into the world-famous Hager pottery that we have today. So, transforming a working blacksmith shop into a class restaurant and private dining club took a lot of work that called for major restoration and decoration. I would be remiss if I didn't highlight the efforts of Dr. Frederick Simpson and his wife, affectionately known as Poggy. One of the original 10 families that formed the Anvil Club, Mrs. Simpson, had a keen, heartfelt interest in this endeavor. And here's why. She was the granddaughter of Henry Clay Edwards and great-granddaughter of Alfred Edwards. She was also a descendant of the Carpenter family that founded Carpentersville. So she certainly went way back with her family with the history of this area. So the Simpsons, they are the ones who supervised the entire restoration and decoration of the club when it began in 1955 and continued to seek out stunning and also interesting antiques to adorn the Anvil Club. They traveled throughout the country as well as Europe in search of these treasures, and many still adorn the club to this day. So this was just after the war. So a number of the members of the Anvil Club had been officers of the armed forces. So this is important because the idea of belonging to a club similar to an officers' club in the service would appeal to them. And there wasn't the internet back then. Television was just getting started, you know. So not everybody had televisions. There was very limited abilities to socialize with people. So having a club like this was really a wonderful thing to have in this community at that time period for this reason. So camaraderie, friendliness, and a feeling of good friendship in a group, it's a good thing. It is to this day too. For nearly 60 years, the Anvil Club and its thousands of members have enjoyed this hidden gem in East Dundee. And I asked this gentleman earlier if he was a member. He had been a member. Anybody else? Anyone here a member of the Anvil Club right now? Karen is? I am too. I actually just joined about 3-4 months ago. And you know what? I'm so sorry that I never joined earlier. Because now that I'm going there, I really look forward to being there. You meet people. Every time I've gone there, I've ended up meeting people who I socialize and talk with. And it's It's so much fun, and the food is so good. In fact, one of the walls used to have stocks, like stockholders glued to it. Certificates. The whole wall was that. And they've preserved them. Actually, I was over at Otto a couple days ago, and Jerry was showing them. They cut them all out individually. And they're all like on plaques now. So they're going to keep those stocks. So that's really awesome, you know. So.
And they are open for lunch now.
Yes, they are. For anybody. Yes.
So they're open to the public for lunch now on Friday.
Yep. I'm going to tell you something. I'm getting off the point a little bit here, but just to mention an example. I had dinner there a couple nights ago. I think it's from 5 to 6. They have a 3-course dinner for $19.95, and that doesn't plus a salad and a dessert for $19.95. So I had lobster tail, and and some rice and all with some sautéed mushrooms. It was excellent. It filled me up, for $19.95. It was really nice, and the service is just exquisite. So it was really good. So anyway, so it's a hidden gem. Here are some examples of the events that define the character of the Anvil Club. I call this segment of this presentation Good Times. These are just examples of what has happened over the years at the Anvil Club. Music, singing, dancing. He's having a good time, isn't he? All people with smiling faces, Luau at the Anvil Club. Everybody loves to eat. One thing I can say, that every single human being on this earth likes to eat food. We all have that in common, no matter what. So the Oktoberfest, which is coming up pretty soon, actually, we're going to have that again. So Halloween costumes, it's cute. Yep, having a good time. It's all about good times. It really is. Nice crowd there on the outdoor veranda at the time. Car shows. They've had car shows over the years there. Many of the members had many of these old cars. It's really amazing. There's an outdoor view of the back, the veranda, as it used to be. That's cute, isn't it? So, life is good, It's all about having a good time. That's important. So it's good. Christmas. So, this must have been during a time when the Bulls were really doing big time, Wasn't that a fun time? I tell you what, I tell you. So, yes, that's what it's all about. Good times at the Anvil Club. So, in 2013, the Anvil Club received a major transformation that caught the attention of every resident in the community. It's no secret that Tom Roser, the president and CEO of Otto, purchased the Anvil Club. It's also no secret that when Tom makes an investment, unimaginable changes for good take place. So the question was, how can you take something that is already a legacy, a known and respected destination for upscale food and unique ambience, and make it even better? The magazine, Quintessential Barrington, highlighted the Anvil Club in its recent July-August 2014 issue. I'm so glad, Karen, you gave this magazine to me. Thank you. So this article gave the answer to the question, how can you make something that's already great even better? The Anvil Club, this is what it stated in the magazine. The Anvil Club, a grand restaurant refined with every reshaping, stands at the center of a little town's reawakening. The well-appointed formal Chicago-style steakhouse has been interesting all its life. Now it's about to become significant. And what we can maybe say is become even more significant, because it's always been significant. That's a powerful statement to make, though. It really is. So, here's why the writer, David Rutter, of the Barrington magazine made this prophetic statement. Here's the reasons why. Here's how it looks today. So I'm going to give you a little tour of the Anvil Club. Okay? Here's the entrance when you walk in. Just beautiful. It's stunning immediately. The entrance features the Haverkamp Anvil. The Haverkamp family actually, years ago, donated that to the Anvil Club, and it's there so that you never forget that the Haverkamps had this at that time. I make that statement there. Here's, to the left, the entrance to Sparky's Hideout, which is on the lower level. And here's, when you're inside Sparky's, here's the hideout down below. And the floor is made of old paving bricks from the streets of Elgin. So that's the way it's been for many, many years. So it's just amazing. All these little details make this location really special. Here's one example. These, by the way, are all, this is like a wine cellar. Those all hold various individuals, members. Any member can have one of these cubicles. I think it holds 12 bottles of wine, if I recall properly. And they can have that for your own wine when you come there. So it's kind of nice. Here's the main bar at the Anvil Club. Isn't that beautiful? And there's a piano where they used to sing around. Remember that? Yep. So were you there?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sing? Yeah. Have you? Good for you. Yeah. I know about that from Lexi Estes. She was mentioning that to me, that it was such a good time. At nighttime, all the individuals who were there would get together around the piano, and they all sing along with the music. They have words playing on the wall. So it was a good time. She was telling me so many things, and Lexi Estes. Everybody know who she is. Lexi Estes is a Hager. She's the one who owns. She's the president and CEO, I think she'd say today. Is that right? Of Hager Pottery. Okay. So her great-grandfather or great-great-grandfather was David Hager, who started that location. Anyway, Joe Estes, her father, was one of the 10 founders of the Anvil Club. So she was here as a little girl. She was always going to the Anvil Club her whole entire life from a little tot. So, and she told me that she used to go there and do her homework when her parents were there. And they put her in a little room, and then one of the members would bring her sneak her a little brandy ice on the side once in a while. She loved that. So it's cute, So that's a beautiful bar. And this is another picture. And this is all, everything has significance. This bar, as it mentions here, has been at the club since 1955. But it was recently refurbished, as it is, except for the granite top, which was recently added. But this was originally in the Oriental Theater in Chicago that opened in 1926. That's where that bar comes from. Another picture looking from outdoor with the old jukebox and all that. Beautiful. Here's another room. This room's called the Who's Who room. And this is a corner piece. And this is the wood carvings. And there's like an owl in there. These came from Vienna. So when the Simpsons were in Vienna, they found these. There's 2 sets of 2. Here's how it looks in the room. So it's very beautiful. This room here, this is called the Lincoln Room. And this is new, this room here. It used to be called something else up until exactly. Yeah, now it's the Lincoln Room. And they made some major changes here. It's beautiful, but this is interesting. This Abe Lincoln portrait is signed at the edges by 5 Illinois governors.
Now, which ones are in penitentiaries and which ones aren't?
I answered that.
I can't keep track.
There's your answer right there. There's your answer. All the ones who aren't in prison. That was good timing, Karen. That was not planned, by the way. She didn't know that. That was not planned. That's good. That's cute. Yeah, that's good. Okay. The saddle room. This is a beautiful room, too. And there's the Lincoln Room in the end. Here's the various saddles. All these saddles are owned by individuals of the club, and they're loaned to the club. There's another picture. It's just unbelievable. When you're on the outside, all these years, I never knew what a beautiful structure was inside those walls, It just amazes me, So another showing the fireplace. Now here's the forge. It's still there to this day. That used to be used by the blacksmith. And here's an example here of an operating forge, of course, not the one from the Anvil Club, but just to show how it looked. All forges that I've seen look pretty much the same. So you can kind of tell from here that this is where it was right here. Here's the outside. This is the veranda, looking from the outer wall. Beautiful facility. I'm going to go into some detail now of some of the various features of the Anvil Club that you'll appreciate. The bellows that were originally there from the blacksmith shop for over 100 years, there they are right there. Look at the size of those bellows. This is a full-size grand piano. So just so you can see the size of those bellows. They were huge. They're still there to this day on the wall. Here's a photograph of those generously endowed cherubs on the wall. They resurrected from the Oriental Club in 1926. Those are also from that club. Again, a beautiful photograph of the bar. The bevel glass window with German silver. Isn't that beautiful? It's a close-up picture. This gorgeous stained glass artwork was saved just 2 weeks before the Chicago fire in 1871. It was taken out for restoration and repairs. So because of that, it escaped destruction. So pretty interesting, isn't it? It's beautiful. Here's the fireplace. This came from a location called or named Georgette's. I tried to do research on Georgette's, and I couldn't find any information on this. I do know that it was an antique store that used to be on Michigan Avenue in Chicago. And Poggy Simpson did much of her shopping at Georgette's. So it must have been a fabulous antique store back in the 1950s. So here's one of the private dining rooms in the wine cellar. So this can seat 10. And this is a beautiful little room that you can have dinner with your family or friends if you want to. Now this is taken from the other wall of that same room. And look at these iron doors right here. This is the entranceway to that little room I just showed you, this room here. So this is the entrance right here. And this door was the door to the vault and safety deposit box at the First National Bank of Dundee. It opened in 1900. So is that interesting? So that's still there to this day. Now this is a horseshoe display. There's 42 of them. They're all different in size and design, and they're all unique. And this was purchased by Joe Estes back in the 50s from Marshall Field. It's been displayed at the Anvil Club for all these years. Back then, Marshall Field, it was so different than they are today. These stores, you could buy unique things you couldn't find anywhere else at these stores. They had a huge display of different types of items. And so it was just a different era, so to speak. Look how small some of these are. It's really something. Now, these doors really intrigue me. And I'm going to show you why. First of all, look at the gunshot. That's a gunshot hole right there. So this building, this door was shot at. Why? Some state there's talk that it was shot by Al Capone. And that it can't be verified, although I will say that Al Capone was in this neighborhood. This is where he lived at, okay? So that's interesting. But there's much more interest to these doors than just this gunshot wound. Here's why. If these doors could only speak. These doors came from a 50-room mansion in Chicago that was located at 2131 to 33 South Dearborn in Chicago. Captains of industry, important politicians, and European nobility and royalty walked through these doors. Here it is. It was purchased in 1901. The owners employed 15 to 25 cooks and maids. Guests were entertained in opulent parlors, among them the Gold Room, which featured gold-rimmed fish bowls, gold spittoons, and a miniature gold piano, and the Chinese Room, where gentlemen could set off tiny firecrackers. Here are the owners. The owners are two women, Ada and Mina Everly. Who are these? They opened the Everly Club, described by Chicago's Vice Commission as probably the most famous and luxurious house of prostitution in the country. Is that amazing? In an era where a beer could cost a nickel, the Everly sisters charged $12 for a bottle of champagne. Dinners started at $50 a person without female company. Gentlemen who left without spending at least $50 were advised not to return. And this is something, because a typical visit at the Everly Club could cost close to $200, which was considerable since $6 a week was considered a good wage. So, is that amazing? That puts things in perspective, doesn't it? It's amazing. Here's some examples of the inside of this home. Here's the entranceway. Wish it was in color, so you could really, in clear, so you could really see great detail, but just so luxurious. Here's one of the rooms was designed to resemble a Pullman dining car. This is unbelievable, the amount of money and expense they put into this here. They maintained this, they put into this roughly $15,000 a year. Now, back then, that was a boatload of money, 15 grand a year, so this was unbelievable. The Everly Club might be this is a statement that's true. The Everly Club might be the only brothel in American history that enhanced rather than diminished a man's reputation. So if you went there, it was something to be proud of. And so men boasted about this. That's why I said earlier about politicians, royalty. They did come here. This was unbelievable. This was the most famous, what do you call it, house of prostitution in the country. And that's where those doors came from. Interesting. So there you have it. Is that something else? That's a mystery. So yes, if these doors could only speak, that is really true. My question is this. I'm surprised there's only one gotcha at home. There's been a lot of them. Yeah. So the Anvil Club. There's so much that can make the Anvil Club unique and special today. So much. This certainly includes the employees. Here's a picture of the same man. 1962, just took this last week. Fernando. He started as a young boy. This was very interesting to me because when the Anvil Club opened, it quickly established the reputation of being a 5-star establishment with the best in every detail, including, of course, the service. To accomplish this, the owners of the Anvil Club handpicked the best, it should be best, not nest, best talent in the industry from the Ritz, the Palmer House, and the Shangri-La in Chicago. Famous places. The pool of men and women were Filipino. In fact, over the years, some 20 Filipino employees at the Anvil Club have all come from the same town in the Philippines, namely Binalonan. They lived here at the Anvil Club and they worked here. Their food and lodging cost them $1 per day. That was it. The photo above is Fernando Nibres. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He started here as a second-generation Anvil Club employee in the early 1960s. He's now 70. He's back at the club. So is that cool? His father started as one of the original employees back in 1955. So that's pretty cool. And that's the same glass. Here's a photograph showing a lot of the Filipinos that were working. And I'll tell you what, I've talked to members. Kim, you must have been going there yourself over the years, huh? You remember a lot of the Filipinos? They give the best service, didn't they? That's right. They lived upstairs. That is correct. They lived here and they worked here at the Anvil Club. And they, like I said earlier, their charge was $1 per day for room and board. That was it. So they all came from, and that was, I'm not talking a long time ago. This was up until the 80s, 1980s, that this took place. What? Well, then they were still living there in the 90s? Really? Wow. Now, the question was asked was still only $1 a day. I don't know about that. I don't know about that. So, pretty interesting, though, isn't it? So it's cool. Now, here's Michael Formicella. He's the new general manager, and he is a classically trained chef from New York's Culinary Institute. There he is with his wife and his daughter. Mike has been the featured chef at the James Beard Awards 3 times and was invited on Martha Stewart's TV show as well. So he's a very, very well-known chef, well-respected chef in the industry.
Do you cover the master chef? I would want to jump, but he's also a master chef.
I don't know. Explain that to me.
Only 90 of them in the country.
Really?
So I learned that as well.
I didn't know that. So he's a master chef, and there's only 90 in the country. So that shows his caliber. So very unique, very interesting. So the Anvil Club, a grand restaurant refined with every reshaping, stands at the center of a little town's reawakening. The well-appointed formal Chicago-style steakhouse is about to become significant. Clubs are about relationships, service, friendliness, and sociability. One-on-one contact with associates has become a lost art today. It really has, because of Twitter, Facebook, emails, texting, making the personal relationships that can develop at clubs all the more important, because it's being lost today. Communication is being lost today. When you see these kids sitting in a restaurant texting each other next door on the same table back and forth, what's wrong with this picture, So communication is what it's all about, So clubs like this are beneficial to this day for this reason. So the Anvil Club, the place is in all manifestations the perfect environment to spend a perfect evening with a perfect meal. Thank you. That's it. Okay.